Welcome to another session of INF 164. In this session, we are going to continue the discussion of classes. So the prerequisite for this video is the previous video. So in the previous video, specifically the last part, or let me just say what we did in general. So in the previous video, we worked with arrays of classes, of objects in general. And we extended that to a list of objects. Then we tried to create a class. So we were modeling a student class. So before I got that crazy error, which was due to naming a label incorrectly. That's why I got that error. So I ended up searching, but Google didn't really help. But what I forgot is that we have the error list where you can see all the errors. But anyways, let's get straight into this video. So in the previous video, we learned how to describe a student, or how to describe a class, an object using a class. So we said, let's describe a student. So the description, we said a student has a name, they have a student number, a date of birth, and some GPA. So to model this, we needed a class where these are our properties or attributes or data members. So in the last video, that's what I'm saying, the last video, if you didn't watch the last part on how to create a class, you must watch it, because now I'm not going to restart that. I'm going to continue where we left. So we said to describe, you add a class to a project. So it's going to be added, you change the internal, we know that by default it's internal, you change it to public. Then it is a good practice to make your attributes private. This is the recommended approach. Then you have your name. I said when you are doing private attributes, just put an M. This is just a recommendation, like it's the standard programming. So even when we work in a company, that's how they communicate. You just put an M, then you put the name of the attribute. So M name, then M student number for the student number, and then we said we are going to model the name as a string because it's text. We are going to model a student number as a string because if we have student numbers that start with a 0, it's going to be difficult to model them as integers. So we are going to, for simplicity, we are going to use a string. Then I introduced the datetime. So in the previous video, I introduced to this datetime sort of object. It's like a class that they created for you to use that models the date and time of any year, of any month, and of any day. So we say MDOB, DOB for date of birth. Then we have the GPA, which is a double. Then for every private attribute, you must have properties. So properties, they must be public. For example, if we want to create a property for this private attribute, we are going to say public. Then we specify string, which is the data type. Then we remove the M, we just say name. So we are going to have the name property. Then in the name property, you have two important methods. You have the set and get. So the set is used to change the private attribute. So these properties are used to change private attributes. So we can't change these private attributes directly from outside of this class because they are private. So we are going to use the properties. So the get is used to read the private attributes value. So this is one way you can do it. Let me just comment this out, or let me cut this. So another way you can say public string, since it's a string, then you remove the m, you have name. Then instead you can say, we can use the shortcut, which is set and get. It doesn't matter which one you start with. So this also works fine. This is perfect also. You can either use this or you can use the standard approach. My recommendation is that when you are doing those practicals, use this short approach. There's no need to suffer to do it this way. But in the semester test and exam, I think they prefer this normal approach. So you can use this approach, or you can use the standard approach. Let me leave it as this for now. Then you repeat the same process for the others. So you're just going to repeat the same process for others. So it's giving me errors because I deleted that name. Didn't I return it? Oh, I didn't. I remember cutting this, but let's do this. So it's this one. So yeah. So you repeat the same process for others. We know that this will be a string. Then this, like in the previous video, I explained in detail how they work. This one, date of birth. Then you remove the M, you have the OB, and so on. Then after the properties, we had constructors. You can use the default constructor, which initializes the name, student number, date of birth, GPA to default values, or you can use the parameterized constructor, which receives some parameters and initializes the name, student number, date of birth, GPA to those specific values. Then we have a method that will print the details of a student. So I explained how this thing works in the previous video. That's why I'm saying the prerequisite of this video is the previous video. Then the next thing that we created was a basic form. So we created a form that has a data grid view for storing the students, or for displaying. In this case, it's for displaying. It's not storing, but it's for displaying. We store these students in a list. Then we have the name. We have this text box. So here you can, like, if you say add student, it's going to add students, a student with these properties. If you say remove student, it's going to remove. I think I made a mistake with this remove. This remove must be on its own. But it's fine. Let me see, remove. Nah, it's fine. It's actually fine. Let me put it here. Remove students. Remove, yeah. So we have add, we have edit. Edit student. Again, it's going to edit a specific student. Let me put it somewhere here. Let me see. I didn't want to. Okay, let's leave it like this for now. Let's just leave it. So this one is for editing student, this one is for editing a specific student. So I'll explain this in detail. So now let's go to the form 1. So I said on the form 1, we need a list, a global variable that will store students. So this is how we created the list. You just say list. I explained in the last video student, then we are creating a list of objects. So I said by default this list is empty, so you have this list called students. Let me do this. So we have this list of students, which is an empty list. Now it's empty, it's not null, it's empty. The count is 0, or the count or the number of items is 0. Then a null list doesn't have anything, it doesn't point to anything, but an empty list is a list of size 0. Then I said in the code you must link your data grid view. So you link your data grid view to your list. So you just say the name of the data grid view dot data source is equals to the name of your list. This can be a list, this can be an array, this can be a binding list. So let's see how this works. So you see this thing is automatic. Automatically we know that this binding part, this linking of the data grid view and the list will create properties. So we'll go to our class. It's going to go to whatever class. In this case, it was the student class. Then look for not attributes, but properties, because they can be accessed outside of the class. These properties represent these private attributes. So we have our name, the way the order in which they appear, the name. Then we have the student number, it's created, the column for the student number is created, DOB, it's created, GPA, it's created. You don't have to create it manually. Then that's the explanation. Where every time you link data grid view, it's going to create columns based on the properties. Now, how do we actually add to the data grid view? It might seem difficult, but it's very easy. So to add to our data grid view, we just have to add to a list. In the previous video, we saw how to add to a list. You create an object. There are two ways. First way is the step-by-step approach. So you just create an object. So in this case, it's a student object. So student object, you can say student equals to new. You can use the default constructor or the parameterized constructor. But for me, in most cases, I prefer this one because it's not messy. So then you can say, after you created a new student, this is a new student object. Because I use the default constructor, I have to assign the properties. So I have to get the name, student number, date of birth, and GPA, and store them where. Let me close this and initialize my object, because we know that the default constructor will initialize to random values or to default values. So after I created that, I can say student dot name is equals to, where do we get the name from? The text box. So txt, then name dot text, then student dot student number equals to txt, student number, then student dot date of birth is equals to, now what did I name my date time peak? I think it was DTP. DTP DOB dot, you don't say dot text, you say dot value. This will get whatever value. Dot value in the date time picker returns what? Let's see, gets the date or time value assigned to the control. So whatever time date you select, it's going to be returned using dot value. Then you can store it in our date of birth. Then the other thing is the GPA, student.gpa is equals to, then I'm going to convert to double nud GPA dot value. Then I'm going to change this GPA thing to receive decimals. So let's go to decimal places and make it 2 decimal places. Then the range, the default one, it's fine, 0 to 100. So then let's see. So we created an object. Step 2 is to what? Add the object to the list. So you can just, how do we add? The name of the list is what? Is students. So we just say students.add. So you have to understand it. Then we add the newly created student. This is the first approach. This is one of the first approach we discussed in the previous video. Then the second approach is to directly add. So you just take your list, students.add, then you say new. Which constructor are you calling? You are calling that overloaded constructor. So it receives the name, it receives the student number, date of birth, and GPA. So this one can be a little bit messy, but let me just use it anyways. It's possible to write this with one line. You just say new student, then the name. Where do we get the name from? A text box, txt name.text. Then where do we get the student number? txt student number.text. Where do we get the date of birth? dtp dob.value. Where do we get the GPA? We have to convert to double nud GPA.value. So we have dot value. Let me just zoom out just to show you. So you can either use this direct approach, which you use the parameterized constructor, or you can use the standard approach. You create default constructor, then you initialize your values to your control values, then you add the student. Or this is the alternative approach. They work the same. So they work the same. They literally do the same thing. So let's consider this. We are going to work with this approach. The other one works the same, but instead it adds whatever new student it created directly. It doesn't like have a placeholder, sort of. So let's go and see what's going to happen. If I say add, or let me run this. So this is my application. So every time I click add, let's enter random values, AA11, yeah, something. So let's say we have something like this. Then when I click add, what's going to happen? It's going to go to the event handler that caused that click. Then it's going to create a student object. So let me do this actually. So it's going to create a student object. So we are going to have a student object which is pointing to this student. Then the student has a name, student number. I'm just going to do this for short. It has DOB, that's what we know. It has GPA. Then by default it's those zeros and stuff, right? Then we are going to assign these values. So dot name, student dot name is equals to whatever we get from the text box and so on. So we are going to take those values, these ones. So we are going to take name, put it in the student, which is AA, then we put 11 and so on. So we have A, we have 11. Then today, because I didn't change the date and time, we have 26 August what. Then we have the GPA, which is 62.23 if I'm not mistaken. Then when we say add, the student is going to be added. So our list will no longer be empty. We know that when we add to a list, it's going to extend. So this list of students will extend, will increase by size 1. So we are going to have an item at position 0. This item, we just take the student. So let me just okay, so let me do that. So we are going to select, so we are going to add this student to our list. So why is it stuck? So I'm going to paste it here. So I know that my list is going to be like this. So I don't know why it's doing like this. Or it's so my list, it's going to be extended by 1. Then this is going to be my student, the one I added. Then next iteration, if I click add again, it's going to repeat the same process. Notice that I click add, but the data grid view doesn't update. This is because this is not a binding list, it's just a regular list. So the disadvantage of this regular list is that after every time you have to refresh the data grid view. So I have to say dvg whatever dot refresh. So this line of code will update. So this line of code updates the data grid view. So if I run this and do the same thing, oh, I have to close that. Then I'm going to do the same thing like that. Then 62 point. Then if I click add now, we know that the process is going to, behind the scenes, our list is going to increase and stuff. But notice now when I click add, so it's actually not adding to the thing. So I guess refresh only updates. It's the other way around. When you update in the data grid view, it updates the list. So let me, instead of using a list, I'm going to use a binding list. So this is, or instead I'm going to relink the data grid view again. So this one won't work. Let me use this. Then now let's run this. So I have to close this. Then if I click AA, then I say add. It's not even updating this one. Okay, let's see what is wrong. So it seems as if the data grid view is not updated with either method. So what's the solution? The solution, we are going to use a binding list. So binding list, it works the same way as a list. There's no difference. You just change the name to binding list. So even here, I'm going to say binding list. It works the same. It doesn't change anything. It only changes, it's a list. The difference is that this one updates. When you are updating your list, it updates the data grid view. Then you have to link your students to this line of code we explained. Then this doesn't change anything. Then now let's see how it works. Then you see it allows the binding list, it allows you to add even here. So let's say AA, then 1, then 62, then we say add. Notice that it added the student having name AA 11, which is the date of birth. You see it took the current time because I didn't edit here. Then GPA is 23. Then we know that our list will look like this. I explained how this works. Then next time I click add, let's say I say BB, then I go maybe 22, then I can say maybe 89. Then when I click add, we know that what's going to happen. When I click add, it's going to go to this. It's going to create a student object. So the student has those properties, we know that. So it's going to create a new student object. So this is a new student object. Name, student number, date of birth, then GPA. Then we can choose the actual values. Then we know that the default constructor will initialize these values to empty, whatever. But after that, we have these assignments. We update the name, we update the student number, we update the date of birth, we update the GPA. So for date of birth, let's choose another date. Yeah, something like this. So it's going to choose 31 May. So So we know that it's going to be BB89, then whatever May, so 31 May, whatever. Then after that, it's going to add that to where? To the list. So it's going to add that student to the list. So it's going to extend this by size of what? By size of by 1. So now you have 2 items. This one is going to refer to this. So you have a list or an array of objects with size 2 because you have 2 items. At position 0 you have the student, then at position 1 you have this student. Then if I go back, then after we know that it's binded to the data grid view, so if I click add, it's going to add that. It's going to update the data grid view also with the appropriate name and student numbers. So this seems easy so far, nothing crazy. So the add is so easy, you just add to the in the multi-form application. It's a different story, but you have to understand this before you even go to the next video. You have to understand this, otherwise you won't understand anything in the video that follows this. So okay, let's say during form load I wanted to add few students, so I can say to avoid adding one by one, because we saw how the add work. So I'm going to say students dot add. I'm going to say new. So I'm going to use the parameterized constructor. So I'm passing the name, the student number, date of birth, so I can just, for date of birth, I'm going to use the same date of birth. Then GPA, I'm just going to pass values there. Well, let me use the previous one. So I added the first student. I'm going to add the second student. So I added 2 default students. So now when I run this, we know how this works. It's the same thing as this, but without the using the add button. At the end, you are going to have a list similar to this one. So let's see. So if I run this, so we have those 2 students with those GPAs because they were added during form load. That's why they are appearing. Now we want to observe the edit. So to edit a student, you have to select from the data grid view. Let me see. You see, by default it selects for you, so you don't have a situation where it's not selecting. So you have to select. If I select, like you select anywhere, you can edit the student. So for example, if I select this and I say maybe EE, then I say 55, whatever, like I can edit I want these whatever I selected. In this case, I selected the first row, so the details will be updated to something like this. So how can we code that specific kind of thing? So it's straightforward. You just have to get the current row index from the data grid view. Then we know that that current row index, if it's 0, it's related to what? To student at 0. If it's 1, it's related to what? To student at 1, and so on. So how can we edit? So editing also, if you don't understand this editing, for the next video you won't understand how to edit, because it depends on one another, I guess. So first you can do it step by step. So step 1, get the row index. So you just say maybe int row index is equals to data grid view students dot, to get this the selected cell, you just say current cell dot row index, like that. So this will return the row index of the selected cell. So this line of code, it gets the row of the selected cell in the data grid view. Then you can use that to manipulate a student at that specific row. To do that, you just say student at row index, or at the selected row. What am I doing? So you just say students, because we want to access at that specific row index. If the row index was 0, it's going to refer to students at 0. We know that it's this student, so that's row 0. If the row was 1, we know that it's this student. Then how do we change? You just say student at row index dot name is equals to, you have to update to whatever the user has selected. So you say dot name is equals to txt name. You can repeat the process, student at the row index. Then you say dot student number is equals to, where do we get the student number? From the text box dot text. Then student, so students at row index, then you just say dot date of birth is equals to dtp whatever dot value, then students at the row index, then you can say dot in this case name, it's the GPA. Where do we get the GPA? From the numeric up down. So nud GPA dot value. So this will update the details of a student, of a specific student, by updating the list. Because of this binding list, it automatically updates the data grid view. So let's see the working of this. So if I run this now, I know that due to form load, I have this list, which is this one in form load. Then if I say maybe here cc whatever 33, then maybe 60, then I click edit. Because I selected the first row, when I click edit, it's going to go in the code. So in the code, it's going to go the selected row. It's going to get the selected row, the row index, which is, in this case, it's 0, because this is row 0. from chapter 2. I think we saw how this works. This is row 0, so it's going to return 0. Row index, we know that is what? It's 0. So my row index in this case is 0, the selected row index. That's the first thing. Then we are going to say students at row index. In this case, it's students at 0 dot name is equals to whatever they enter in the text box. So we are going to go to students at 0. It's this. When we say dot name, it's going to refer to this day which was AA. So it's going to update this name to what? To whatever they entered in the text box. So in this case, it's going to be CC. Again, it's going to repeat the same process. Students at 0, the student number equals to whatever student number. In this case, it's 33, so we are updating whatever date they select, whatever GPA. Then it's done. We didn't touch the data grid view because of the binding list. The data grid view also it's going to be updated. It's automatic. So let's see the working of that. So if I say edit, let's see, why is it not working now? Let's see what went wrong. So let's go to our so we click edit. It's not edit. Oh, it actually did edit. Why is it doing like this? Let me see something. So it does edit, but it does it in a certain way. So let's whatever, let's see 3360. Then I say edit. So it seems as if it edited, but when I click somewhere, but it doesn't update. So I'm not sure what's the issue, but it's these values are actually edited. Like when I click, you can see that they changed. Let me click on the second one and say edit. You see they changed, but I don't know why they are not updated automatically. Let's do this dvg. I guess that's why they prefer multi-form applications rather than a single form application when it comes to these edit and stuff. Oh, don't tell me I opened 2 forms. That's why it was not working. Let me see if now is it working. But you see now I'm editing the wrong things. then I say edit, so it's not updating anyways. It's only updating when I click there, which I'm not sure what's the issue. So let's try to run this. Then we say edit. So this one updates. So for the change to appear or to immediately appear, when you are normally, this happens when you are dealing with a single form, but in multi-form application you don't have to say refresh. So when you are dealing with a single form application, one line of code that you have to add is a refresh for the changes to take place immediately. We saw that you have to click on each, which is not that ideal. So the refresh thing will help you for those changes to show immediately. Even though it changed, it didn't show immediately, but the process is still it works the same way. So get the specific row index, then you change the object at that specific row index. You just update the details of that specific object to whatever values the user entered. Then the last thing that we have to consider is the delete or remove. Okay, or remove will remove the current object. So again, it's also straightforward. Also to remove, you just get the current index, get the row index. So you just say int row index is equals to dvg dot current cell dot row index. Then to remove is straightforward, students dot remove add. Then you just say row index. You don't have to think about it. So this will remove a student at that specific index. So if I run this, so if I select this and I say remove, it's going to, the current index will be 0 1. We are at row 1, so it's going to remove this at position 1, so it's going to cancel this. At the end, my list will be like this. So let's see if that's the case. Then I say remove, so you see that one is gone. Then here I can say remove, that one is gone. Now when I click to when I say remove, what's going to happen? Nothing, because there's actually no it's going to crash. So how do we avoid that? So we just have to check if the current cell is not empty. So we can say, we can put this in an if statement. We can either use this or we can use exception handling, so it's up to you. So if you use if statements, you just check if the current cell, if dvg dot current cell is equals to null. Maybe you can just say return or don't do anything, or you can tell the user that no students to remove. Then otherwise you must remove. I'm going to, this is one way you can handle it. If I run this now, then if I say remove, you know that it will remove. Now if I say this, it won't crash. The other alternative is to use exception handling. So we know how to use that. It's also straightforward. We saw it in the first lecture. So you just say try, then it's try catch, then you just say catch, then you specify if you want to, if you know the specific exception, you can use null preference exception. If you don't know, you can use the general exception, which caches all exceptions. In the try block, we put the code that might cause errors. Then here we just say message box dot show, then ex dot message. As easy as that. So if I run this, if I say remove, then remove, you see now it's not crashing. Object reference not set to an object, to an instance of an object. So yeah, that's how you can do it. In the next video, we are going to do multi-form application. So the appropriate way of doing add and edit, but you have to know this one. They might ask this in the test, or they are going to ask the one they love, multiple form add and edit. So to understand the next video, you have to understand this one, because it comes from this one. It's just a combination of this one, of this one and the lecture 1 video we did for multi-form application. But now we are just extending that to object-oriented programming. But it's the same things we did, especially lecture 1 video. If you don't remember it, or the one of multi-form applications, you have to go to it, because to understand what we are doing, you have to understand that lecture 1 video that we did. So yeah, I guess that's it for this video. Oh, I forgot to show how to print whatever. To use that print method, let's say we want to print the details of the students in the message box. So I'm just going to add a button quickly. So this is going to be print. Then I'm going to name it btn print, which is not necessary, but it was just emphasis of like looping. So to print, we just have to call this print method for each student. So we can use the for loop for each loop, whatever you want actually. So for me, I'm going to use for each loop. So for each student in students, then we just say print. Actually, print returns a string. So let's declare an output is equals to empty string. Then here we are just going to add student.print because the print method returns the details as a string. Then we can add a new line. So I guess this is then we can maybe display that result in a message box. So let's see how it works. So since I have students, for each student, I have 2 students. For each student, we'll loop through, but in the list, not in the actual data grid view, but it works the same. The data grid view helps you to visualize. So it's going to say for each student. So let me go here. Since we have this list, it's going to say for each student in this. So it's going to start here. It's going to call the print method. The print method will define result and name, add the name of the student. In this case, it's AA, student number, date of birth, and GPA. Then next iteration is a for each loop, so it's going to go to the second student. Then it's going to add the details, like it's going to call the print for this. Then it's going to, like, it's so straightforward. If I say print, you can see that their details are printed on this message box. So yeah, I guess that's it for this video. In the next video, you're going to do multi-form applications.